Did you know that something as simple as chewing gum can cause problems? Yes, there are places in the world where this daily habit is strictly prohibited. And that's just the beginning. The world is full of strange laws that defy our logic and reveal how each country has its own vision of what is right and what is wrong. Some of these rules are so absurd that one might ask, how did anyone come up with that? But the truth is that these laws exist and often reflect cultural values, historical values, and even social control in ways few of us imagine. Do you want to know more about these facts about the country that can completely change your perception? Get ready, because today we are going to explore the strangest things in the legal world. And believe me, you will be surprised by what is to come. Imagine waking up in a new country, ready to explore its beauty and customs, when you suddenly discover that something as trivial as chewing gum can get you a fine or even jail time. The world is full of curious laws, each reflecting cultural values, histories, and even quirks that defy our understanding. Some of these laws are like relics from a distant past, while others arose for reasons so strange that they don't even seem real. But the truth is that behind each unusual rule, there is a context that makes us reflect on how each society defines what is right or wrong. These laws reveal much more to us than appears at first glance. They invite us to delve into the soul of a nation, to understand its fears, its priorities, and even its eccentricities. Why, after all, do certain countries have such strange laws? Is it to protect traditions? Avoid chaos? Or perhaps ensure the maintenance of public order, even if in a questionable way? Curiosity about countries grows as we discover these rules, and often the shock makes us question our own norms. The most fascinating thing is that when we learn about these laws, we realize that what is normal for one country may be completely absurd for another. Something as simple as chewing gum, a habit so common in many places, can be seen as a threat in Singapore. The strangest laws may seem like a joke to us, but they are real and have consequences. And this in itself sparks even greater curiosity about how the world works in different cultures and societies. And so, we begin the journey through these laws that defy our perception. Each of them takes us deeper into this universe of unusual rules and makes us wonder, what else is hidden between the lines of the nations we think we know? With this, we move on to a surprising example, perhaps the most famous of all, involving a simple chewing gum and the strict ban in Singapore. Singapore, known for its spotless streets and strict discipline, has one of the most famous and unusual laws in the world: the ban on chewing gum. The simple act of chewing gum, something many consider trivial, has been strictly prohibited since 1992. The origin of this law is deeply linked to the government's desire to keep the city clean and prevent vandalism caused by gum stuck in elevators, on subway doors, and even on sidewalks. For Singapore, the city's aesthetics and public order have always been priorities, and this ban symbolizes strict control over daily life. This law drastically changed the routine of the inhabitants. Imagine not being able to buy gum anywhere, not even in supermarkets. This directly affects daily habits that, in other countries, are absolutely normal. And who gets caught with gum? Well, the punishment can be severe, including heavy fines and, in some cases, community service. For Singaporeans, chewing gum has become a symbol of disorder, and its absence a reflection of the discipline that governs local society. But why such a drastic measure? The decision came after incidents that caused major disruption, such as chewing gum clogging automatic subway doors, creating delays and costs for the transportation system. A quick and definitive solution was needed. This curiosity about Singapore is striking, as it makes us reflect on how something so small can have such a big impact. For tourists, this law is almost incomprehensible, but for locals, It is a way to ensure that the city continues to run smoothly. And now, over the years, this law has become an icon of Singapore's strict image, famous for its restrictions and control. However, this leads us to think about other laws that have similarly emerged to protect historical and cultural values, such as the strange ban in France on giving the name Napoleon to pigs. Let's discover why this law, as curious as it is unusual, is part of the history of France. In France, one of the most iconic figures in its history, Napoleon Bonaparte, continues to influence the country in ways that go beyond the history books. There is a curious law that prohibits calling pigs Napoleon. To many, this law may seem strange, but the truth behind it reflects the deep respect that France has for its historical leaders. Napoleon is more than a military figure. It symbolizes French power and pride, and associating its name with an animal that is culturally considered impure was considered an unacceptable insult. The ban, of course, refers to preserving the honor of a figure who profoundly marked French history. Imagine living in a society where even the name you choose for an animal must respect historical figures. This reveals a lot about the culture and the value that France places on its heritage. Unlike other countries, where animal names are a purely personal choice, here the decision carries cultural weight that reflects reverence for its past. These types of laws make us reflect on how societies are structured around symbols. In a time when freedom of expression is so discussed, a curious thing about France is the realization that even the names of pigs can be limited to protect the honor of a great leader. It is a unique way to preserve Napoleon's memory and prevent his name from being used in a pejorative way. And for anyone thinking about challenging this rule, the answer is simple. The law is on the emperor's side. By delving into these details, we better understand how strange laws reveal the heart of a nation. But while in France protecting Napoleon's name is essential, in other parts of the world, cultural preservation takes very different forms. Let's now go to Denmark, where even water on restaurant tables is a legal issue. Find out why, in some places, charging for a simple glass of water may be prohibited. In Denmark, one of the nations most concerned about the well-being of its citizens, there is a law that may surprise visitors. It is prohibited to charge for water in restaurants. At first glance, this rule may seem generous, almost a gift for those who are used to paying for each glass of water in other countries. But behind this law, there is a strong message about access to basic resources and respect for consumer rights. Water, considered an essential good, must be available to everyone at no additional cost. This curiosity about the country reflects a society that values equality and well-being. The ban on charging for water in restaurants is an extension of this principle, ensuring that no one is deprived of such a fundamental resource. It's interesting to see how something that may seem insignificant, a glass of water, can be part of a larger debate about social justice. In Denmark, it is not just a question of hospitality, but of ethics and rights. This law, however, is not without controversy. Many restaurant owners argue that while they are required to provide free water, they have no way to pass on this cost, especially in tourist areas. Balancing hospitality and financial sustainability is a challenge many face. Still, most Danes see this practice as a way to protect social welfare and maintain the tradition of caring for those who live in or visit the country. This view of water as a basic right makes us reflect on how different countries approach similar issues in different ways. While in Denmark water is free, elsewhere the law focuses on ensuring safety and responsibility on the roads. Let's now travel to Germany, where driving without fuel on the famous Autobahn can get you into serious trouble. In Germany, one of the most curious and, at the same time, strict laws is the one that affects the famous Autobahn, a highway known for not having speed limits in many sections. However, there is a rule that may catch many unsuspecting drivers by surprise. It is prohibited to run out of fuel while driving on this road. For anyone who has ever faced the nervousness of watching the gas needle approach zero, this law seems like a real extra pressure. But the objective is clear: to ensure that traffic flow is maintained and to avoid accidents caused by sudden stops. Driving on the Autobahn is a privilege that requires responsibility. The reason behind this law is that running out of fuel is considered an avoidable human error, which puts not only the driver but everyone around them at risk. Therefore, stopping on the side of the road for lack of gas is considered negligence and can result in heavy fines. This type of punishment reflects the German culture of efficiency and order, where personal responsibility is highly valued. The impact on the daily lives of drivers is notable. Anyone who travels on the Autobahn knows that lack of fuel is not just an inconvenience, but a serious violation. This law makes prevention a priority. It is common to see drivers stopping at gas stations before entering the highway, making sure they have a full tank. Interestingly, this also promotes a level of planning that is often missing on other roads around the world. For Germans, the road should be a space of safety and speed, but never of carelessness. And so, while in Germany, drivers must always be prepared, in other countries, such as Switzerland, the laws go beyond the road and even invade free time. Imagine not being able to wash your car on Sundays. In Switzerland, this curious restriction is linked to religious and cultural traditions, something that shows us another facet of unusual laws around the world. In Switzerland, a country known for its tranquility and respect for traditions, there is a rule that may seem curious to many foreigners. It is prohibited to wash the car on Sundays. This law is deeply rooted in the concept of Sunday rest, a tradition that values silence and rest on this specific day of the week. For the Swiss, Sunday is sacred, not only in the religious sense, but also as a day on which tranquility must be preserved at all costs. It is considered that washing the car, such a simple task, breaks this peaceful atmosphere. This curiosity about the country makes us reflect on how laws can be shaped by culture and religious traditions. In Switzerland, Sunday is not just a day of personal rest, but a time of community, where even the most mundane tasks, like washing a car, are put aside in favor of an atmosphere of calm. For those who live in the countryside, this law is seen as a way to maintain mutual respect and ensure that everyone can enjoy a day without noise or interruptions. The opinion of tourists, however, can be very different. Many visitors are surprised to discover that something so trivial is regulated by law, especially in a country as modern as Switzerland. But for the Swiss, this rule goes beyond a simple prohibition. It represents a commitment to quality of life and the maintenance of a balanced lifestyle where collective rest is valued. And yes, anyone who breaks this law could face fines. This respect for Sunday rest leads us to reflect on how different countries approach their traditions. While in Switzerland, washing your car on Sundays is considered an infraction, in another corner of Europe, in Italy, cultural preservation takes on a completely different form. Let's find out how the ban on high heels in Italy's historic sites is an attempt to protect the past while ensuring the future. In Italy, a country full of history and culture, there is a rule that may surprise many fashion lovers. It is prohibited to wear high heels in some historical places. This law, at first glance, seems like an exaggerated measure, especially in a country so famous for its elegance. However, the reason is quite practical: to protect historical sites that over time suffer damage from the repetitive impact of high heels. Ancient ruins and delicate sidewalks are under constant threat, and the law was created to preserve the heritage that is, literally, the foundation of Italian culture. This curiosity about the country reveals the balance that Italy seeks between the past and the present. While glamour and fashion are part of the national identity, the preservation of historical treasures is even more sacred. And for those hoping to explore cities like Rome or Florence, that means making a small sacrifice of style for the sake of cultural preservation. After all, protecting centuries-old monuments is a task that requires everyone's cooperation, right down to clothing. For tourists, this rule can be somewhat annoying. Many people plan their trips thinking about how to dress elegantly, but end up having to change their heels for more appropriate footwear to avoid fines and guarantee access to historical sites. However, this change in perspective can be seen as a lesson in how respect for cultural heritage goes beyond any fashion trend. It is a reminder that history deserves to be carefully protected, even those that come from where we least expect it. And so, while the Italians take care of their historical relics, we cross the Atlantic to the United States, where the strange laws take on a much more comical tone. In Kentucky, for example, putting ice cream in your pocket is a crime. Find out why this seemingly harmless practice became the subject of legislation in this American state. In the United States, the state of Kentucky has one of the most curious and, at the same time, funniest laws. It is prohibited to put ice cream in your pocket. This rule may seem absurd to someone who hears it for the first time. After all, who would put an ice cream in their pocket? But behind this unusual law, there is a historical explanation. In the past, farmers used this unusual practice as a way to attract horses from other owners. They put ice cream in their pockets so that the animals could follow the smell and thus be stolen discreetly. To put an end to this type of deception, the law was implemented, and although it seems unnecessary today, it is still in force. This curiosity about the country makes us realize how some laws may have emerged for very practical and creative reasons, but over time they lost their original meaning. Still, the law remains in effect, and carrying ice cream in your pocket in Kentucky is still a crime, even if no one tries to steal horses that way anymore. It's interesting how society, at certain times, creates legal solutions to specific problems that eventually become curious relics of a bygone era. For tourists, this law may be a source of laughter, but it is also a reminder that, in some places, common sense is challenged by rules that seem out of place. What in other states would be a strange or even fun practice, in Kentucky can result in legal problems. This peculiar vision of legislation makes us reflect on how laws change over time, but do not always disappear, even when their reasons for existence no longer exist. So, while we have fun with this unique law, we continue our journey through other equally strange rules. Now, we have crossed the Atlantic again, this time to the United Kingdom, where the preservation of historical aesthetics is taken so seriously that even the color of the house can be regulated. Let's find out why you can't paint your house without permission from the British government. In the United Kingdom, a country known for its reverence for history and tradition, there is a law that may surprise many visitors. You cannot simply paint your house without first obtaining permission from the government, especially in historically preserved areas. This rule, which may seem somewhat restrictive, aims to protect the architectural character of cities and towns that treasure centuries of history. In listed areas, where each building represents a part of British history, the government even interferes with the colors of the facades to ensure that visual harmony and historical legacy are maintained. This curiosity about the country shows how the UK approaches heritage preservation in a very practical way. In cities like Bath and York, where the streets look like real period scenes, every detail counts, and that includes the color of the houses. The intention is to prevent modern changes from compromising the appearance of a place that represents centuries of history. For many residents, this regulation is seen as a way to preserve the identity of their cities, ensuring that they remain a reflection of their past. For tourists, this law may seem unusual, but for Britons, it is a matter of national pride. Keeping cities visually authentic is part of a shared responsibility between government and citizens. And those who try to break this rule can face heavy fines and even orders to repaint the house in its original color. This law is more than a mere aesthetic issue. It reflects a commitment to cultural memory and respect for the past. And so, while the United Kingdom is concerned with the visual harmony of its cities, in other places, such as China, the laws take on a more spiritual tone. Discover how, in the most populous country in the world, even reincarnation requires government permission. A surprising law that makes us question the role of government in religious beliefs. In China, a country with a vast history and rich spiritual tradition, there is a law that borders on the surreal. To reincarnate, you must obtain permission from the government. Although this rule seems almost impossible to believe, it reveals a lot about the control that the state exercises, even over spiritual matters. The law was created with the intention of controlling Tibetan monks, and in particular, the Dalai Lama, whose reincarnation is a deeply important event for Tibetan Buddhism. By requiring anyone who wishes to reincarnate to obtain government approval, the Chinese state seeks to interfere in a fundamental aspect of Tibetan culture and religion. This state control over something as personal and sacred as reincarnation shows how, in China, politics and religion are intertwined in a unique way. While in many parts of the world faith is a matter of personal choice, in China it can be regulated and monitored. Curiosity about the country increases as we realize how the government views religion as a political and power tool. For those who follow Buddhist traditions, this law represents a profound intrusion on their spiritual freedom. This legislation, although it may seem absurd to many, is taken very seriously within China. It was imposed to prevent religious figures, such as the Dalai Lama, from freely choosing their successors without government interference. Control over reincarnation ensures that the Chinese state maintains power over religious communities even after the death of their spiritual leaders. It is a reminder of how laws, in certain societies, can exceed the limits of the earthly and influence what many consider divine. And while in China, the cycle of life and death is even controlled, in countries like Australia, strange laws may have a lighter but equally curious origin. Let's travel to the other side of the world, where wearing pink shorts after noon is prohibited on Sundays. Find out why such a specific law exists and what it tells us about the country's British roots. In sunny Australia, where a relaxed lifestyle seems to be the rule, there is a law that may surprise even lovers of vibrant colors. It is prohibited to wear pink shorts on Sundays after noon. This rule, although it may seem absurd, is a legacy of the ancient British traditions that shaped the first Australian colonies. In the past, the dress code reflected respect for the church and Sunday rest, and colors considered inappropriate were seen as an affront to morality and public decorum, especially on days of worship. This curiosity about the country makes us think about how ancient traditions can leave lasting traces on contemporary laws, even if they no longer make as much sense today. The ban on pink shorts in a country as modern and cosmopolitan as Australia is a reflection of how Britain's past still resonates in its customs. For many Australians, this law is seen as a relic of a time when social conventions were extremely rigid but are now obsolete. Although rarely enforced, this law is notable for its specificity. Imagine having to remember to change your clothes at noon on a Sunday just to avoid legal problems. Tourists find this rule absurd, and many are not even aware of its existence. However, it symbolizes the transition from a colonial Australia to a modern nation, but one that still carries vestiges of a past in which even the color of your clothes could be subject to legislation. And so, as we ponder how much clothing can be controlled by curious laws, we cross the world to Russia, where even the cleanliness of cars is subject to regulation. Find out why, on the streets of Moscow, driving a dirty car can cost you a lot, and how this law fits into the country's public image. In Russia, a country known for its rigor and order, there is a law that may seem a bit unusual. It is prohibited to drive a dirty car. For many, the dirtiness of a car is a matter of personal taste, or even practicality in rainy seasons. But on the streets of Moscow and other large Russian cities, keeping your vehicle clean is a legal requirement. The reason for this curious legislation is linked to public image and the Russian culture of cleanliness and decorum. A dirty car, for the Russian authorities, conveys an image of neglect and disorder, something that the country tries to avoid at all costs. This curiosity about the country reveals an interesting aspect of Russian society: the care of one's external image and the need to maintain a respectable appearance. It is not only an aesthetic issue, but also a way to preserve order in cities. Fines for violators of this rule can be steep, and the definition of a dirty car can vary, but generally these are vehicles with license plates that are illegible due to dirt. This makes us reflect on how something seemingly trivial can be taken seriously in different parts of the world. For Russians, this law is an extension of the mentality that values discipline and respect for public space. Dirt in a car is seen as a reflection of the person who drives it, and, therefore, keeping the vehicle clean is not only a matter of personal hygiene, but also of respect for society. For tourists, however, this rule may come as a surprise, especially in cities where weather conditions make dirt almost inevitable. And while in Russia, keeping your car clean is a point of pride, in other countries, such as Greece, even electronic games have been subject to strict regulations. Let us now explore the curious ban on playing video games in public places and discover how this law attempted to combat a growing habit in Greece. In Greece, a land rich in mythology and history, there is a law that stands out for its strictness against a modern form of entertainment. Playing video games in public places was, for a time, strictly prohibited. This measure was implemented as part of a government effort to combat gambling addiction, but the wording of the law ended up being so broad that even innocent video games were included. The result was widespread confusion and legislation that, rather than focusing on gambling, affected casual gamblers, whether tourists or locals. This curiosity about the country reveals how the intentions of the laws do not always align perfectly with the practical effects. Greece tried to combat the problem of illegal casinos and slot machines, but ended up banning even children from playing their portable consoles in squares and cafes. Initially, law enforcement was strict, with fines for anyone caught gambling in public places. This sparked a debate about individual freedom and state control over forms of entertainment. For tourists and video game lovers, this law was received with bewilderment. Many visitors, accustomed to viewing video games as a harmless activity, were surprised by the severity of the restrictions. However, over time, public pressure and absurd application of the law caused it to be repealed. Today, playing video games in public places in Greece is no longer a crime, but the controversy surrounding it has left its mark on how the laws can affect everyday life in unexpected ways. And so, while in Greece, the control over digital entertainment generated controversy, in Japan, the control over the body and health also led to a curious law. Now let's understand why in Japan there is legislation prohibiting people from being fat, and how this relates to the national concern for public health. In Japan, a country known for its longevity and healthy habits, there is a law that may seem surprising. Being fat is technically prohibited. Since Dois Mille Oito, the Japanese government has set limits on waist circumference for men and women over 40. For men, the limit is 85 centimeters, and for women, 90 centimeters. This policy, known as the metabolic law, was created to combat the rise in obesity-related diseases and promote a healthier lifestyle. Although there are no direct sanctions for those who exceed these limits, companies and public institutions are obliged to ensure that their employees undergo regular examinations and take measures to reduce their weight if necessary. This curiosity about Japan reveals how much society values collective health and personal discipline. The country, famous for its balanced diet and practices such as hara hachi bu, custom of eating up to oitenta% satisfaction, seeks, through this law, to keep its population active and away from metabolic diseases. However, for many foreigners, this regulation may seem like an invasion of individual freedom, transforming healthcare into a legal obligation. The impact on the daily lives of Japanese people is significant. Each year, millions of workers undergo mandatory medical examinations, and those who do not meet the requirements are encouraged to participate in nutritional re-education and physical activity programs. For the Japanese, this is part of a collective pact for the well-being of the nation, and the social expectation of being physically fit is widely accepted. However, this pressure can raise questions about the boundaries between public health care and individual freedom. And so, while in Japan concern for the body is at the center of health policies, in Saudi Arabia, the laws focus on norms of social behavior. Let's find out why, in one of the most conservative countries in the world, showing affection in public can be considered a crime. In Saudi Arabia, a country deeply rooted in Islamic traditions and a strict moral code, there is a law prohibiting public expressions of affection. Kissing, hugging, or even holding hands in public can be considered a violation of local customs and lead to severe punishments. This ban reflects the strong influence of Sharia, Islamic law, which dictates much of daily life in the country. For many Westerners, accustomed to open displays of affection, this rule may seem extreme, but in Saudi Arabia, respect for cultural norms is taken very seriously. This curiosity about the country reveals to us how laws can reflect values deeply rooted in society. Saudi Arabia is one of the most conservative countries in the world, and public expressions of affection are considered inappropriate and offensive to Islamic morality. For Saudis, privacy is sacred, and intimacy should be reserved for the family or private environment. Showing affection in public is considered a violation of this rule, and, for those who fail to comply, consequences can include fines, arrests, and, in more serious cases, even deportation in the case of foreigners. For tourists, especially those traveling from more liberal cultures, this law may come as a shock. Many visitors are not aware of the severity of social norms and unintentionally end up breaking the law by showing affection in public. However, for Saudis, these rules are a fundamental part of the country's cultural identity, and respecting them is crucial to maintaining order and respect among members of society. While in Saudi Arabia, the expression of affection is strictly controlled, in Iran, government interference is also seen deeply in people's personal style. Find out why Western hairstyles may be banned in Iran, and how this rule reflects the country's attempt to preserve its cultural identity. In Iran, a country where the preservation of Islamic culture is a priority, personal appearance goes far beyond an aesthetic choice. The government even regulates permitted hairstyles. Western-influenced haircuts, such as the popular Mohawk style, or any hairstyle considered decadent, are prohibited. This measure, imposed as part of an effort to combat the Western cultural invasion, aims to preserve the country's traditions and values. For many Iranians, especially young people, this rule is seen as an attempt to limit individual freedom and stifle personal expression. This curiosity about the country reveals how much government control can extend to even the most personal decisions. For Iranian authorities, public appearance is a reflection of national identity, and any sign of Western influence is seen as a threat to cultural integrity. Extravagant hairstyles are considered symbols of rebellion and disrespect for traditional norms. The imposition of government-approved haircuts is part of a broader policy of public restraint and morality, in which appearance is also controlled. For young people, especially those looking for ways to express themselves, this law can be enormously frustrating. Imposing an aesthetic standard limits their ability to adopt global trends and connect with what they see in other countries. Many, however, find creative ways to break the rules, quietly seeking to adopt Western styles in private settings. The impact of this law reflects the constant tension between modernity and tradition, with Iranian youth trying to find a balance between following the rules and expressing their individuality. While in Iran, even hairstyles are regulated, in Canada, the unusual laws also surprise in other ways. Let's now go north, where the number of coins used in a transaction may be limited by law. Find out why coin payment is restricted in Canada and what this tells us about the country's economic organization. In Canada, a country known for its organization and friendliness, there is a peculiar law that even regulates how citizens can pay for goods and services. Under Canadian law, there are limits on the number of currencies that can be used in a single transaction. For example, the merchant may refuse payment for a large bill exclusively with $1 or smaller denomination coins. The idea behind this law is to prevent large payments made in coins from causing disruption and overburdening businesses, especially small shops and establishments. This curiosity about the country makes us reflect on the balance between practicality and organization. While for many coins are just a form of payment, like any other, in Canada, this type of transaction can be seen as a hassle, especially when the value is high. It is a way to make commercial operations flow more quickly and efficiently, preserving the time of merchants and consumers. The law sets a limit of up to 25 coins in a transaction for smaller denominations, preventing someone from, for example, trying to pay for a large purchase with hundreds of coins. For Canadians, this rule is a practical and reasonable measure, although many are not aware of its existence until they try to make an unusual coin payment. On the other hand, for tourists, it may come as a surprise to discover that their coins accumulated throughout the trip will not be accepted if the value exceeds the limit. Still, respecting these guidelines is part of Canadian common sense to keep things orderly and fair for everyone. While in Canada, currency transactions are limited by law, in other countries, such as Thailand, laws may focus on personal morality. Let's now explore why, in Thailand, going out without underwear is illegal, and how this reflects concerns about public decency and local culture. In Thailand, a country known for its beautiful landscapes and rich cultural heritage, there is a curious law that, at first glance, may seem exaggerated. It is prohibited to leave the house without wearing underwear. This rule reflects the strong emphasis that Thai society places on public morality and appropriate behavior. While it is not common to see this law strictly enforced, its existence symbolizes the government's desire to maintain a certain level of decorum, especially in a country where tourism is one of the largest industries. This curiosity about the country makes us reflect on how public decency is valued in different cultures. In Thailand, external appearance is considered a reflection of individual dignity, and going out without underwear would be considered a violation of this principle. Although this law is somewhat difficult to enforce, it connects to a social expectation that people should behave appropriately in public. For Thais, preserving public image goes beyond clothing. It is a sign of respect for society. For tourists visiting Thailand, this law may come as a surprise, especially those who come from cultures where dress codes are more relaxed. However, as with many decency laws, it is more of a guideline than a strictly enforced rule. Still, it is important that visitors understand the value that Thai culture places on appearance and behavior in public, and follow these guidelines respectfully. And while Thailand even regulates underwear, in the United Arab Emirates, the laws reflect a deep respect for religious traditions, especially during Ramadan. Let's now find out why eating in public during Ramadan can be illegal in the Emirates, and how this law affects both locals and tourists. In the United Arab Emirates, a country that combines modernity with deep religious traditions, there is a law that prohibits eating or drinking in public during the holy month of Ramadan, between sunrise and sunset. This rule, applied to both locals and tourists, reflects respect for the Islamic faith and the fasting practiced by Muslims during this period. For foreigners, especially those who do not follow Islam, this law may be difficult to understand, but it represents a pillar of local society where religious devotion and discipline are highly valued. This curiosity about the country leads us to realize how religion can directly influence the public behavior and laws of a nation. In the Emirates, Ramadan is a time of reflection, purification, and self-control. Eating in public while the majority of the population is fasting would be considered a lack of respect for traditions. Therefore, anyone caught violating this rule can face fines and, in some cases, even prison. This applies to both residents and visitors, who are encouraged to consume food and drink in private spaces, such as their hotel rooms, during the fast. For tourists, this law is a lesson in the importance of respecting local customs, even if they are very different from their own traditions. Although the United Arab Emirates is an international and modern destination, during Ramadan, life takes on a slower, more spiritual pace, and visitors should be aware of these regulations. This law not only protects religious traditions, but also reinforces the value of community and mutual respect. While in the Emirates, the laws are based on respect for fasting, in Norway, the care of animals is also taken to a surprising level. Let's now find out why neutering dogs without justification is prohibited in Norway, and how this law reflects environmental awareness and animal protection in the country. In Norway, a country known for its strong connection with nature and its animal welfare policies, there is a surprising law. It is prohibited to castrate dogs without medical justification. Unlike many other countries where castration is common for population or behavioral control, in Norway, this practice is only allowed if there is a clear veterinary reason, such as a health problem that can be solved by castration. The philosophy behind this law is to preserve the physical integrity of the animals and avoid unnecessary surgical interventions. This curiosity about the country highlights Norway's commitment to the protection of animal rights. For many, neutering a dog is an effective way to avoid problems such as aggression or unwanted pregnancies. But in Norway, legislation means that animals must be preserved in their natural state unless there is a proven medical need. This reflects the view that animal welfare is directly related to the preservation of nature and respect for life. This law, however, also sparks debates among veterinarians and pet owners. Many believe that neutering is a way to prevent disease and improve coexistence with animals. But in Norway, the concern is that the practice is being used unnecessarily, interfering with the natural biology of dogs. For those who want to neuter their pets, it is necessary to obtain approval from a veterinarian who certifies the need for the procedure, ensuring that it is not a decision made out of convenience. While in Norway, animal protection laws focus on preserving the integrity of pets, other nations have equally fascinating rules to protect what they consider important. We have now come to the end of this journey through the world's strangest laws and will reflect on what these rules tell us about the cultures and societies that created them. Throughout this journey, through some of the world's strangest laws, it became clear that each of them is a reflection of the society that created it. These rules, as strange as they may seem, reveal the complexity of the values, traditions, and concerns of different cultures. From the strict control of reincarnation in China to the ban on washing cars on Sundays in Switzerland, we realize that these laws, in many cases, serve as a bridge between the past and the present, between modernity and the traditions that shape social behavior. These fun facts about countries show that laws are more than just regulations. They tell stories, preserve identities, and sometimes make us question our own norms. The ban on something as trivial as chewing gum in Singapore reminds us how much a society can value order and cleanliness. Likewise, the rules of conduct in Saudi Arabia make us reflect on how religion can profoundly influence the daily life of a country. What may seem absurd to some makes perfect sense to others within the cultural context. What we can learn from these laws is that they are not just restrictions, but also invitations to better understand the world around us. Each opens a window into a nation's deepest values, whether the preservation of historical heritage in Italy or the protection of animal welfare in Norway. These laws show us that behind each rule there is an attempt to preserve something that society considers precious, whether it is a tradition, a historical figure, or even collective health. And so we end our exploration of these curious laws, but the curiosity continues. After all, what else could be hidden in the pages of other countries' legal codes? The world is vast and full of surprises, and there will always be new rules and traditions to discover and question.
Hey explorers, if you love discovering the amazing curiosities and stories we share here on Exploring Nations, how about supporting the channel with just $1? This small gesture can make a big difference and is essential to keep this content going. Without your support, our journey might be cut short. And there's more. When you shop on Amazon, use our special link. It costs you nothing extra, plus you get an exclusive discount and it helps us out a lot. The links for donations and Amazon are pinned in the first comment. Don't let this adventure stop, we're counting on you. Subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and drop us a comment.